What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by comic creator, Hollywood writer Rodney Barnes. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I feel like this is a long time coming. You seem to just do interviews. You are a busy person all the time, and so I'm like, I gotta respect your time a little bit. So I was like, I'll let other people talk to you about comics, but finally I was like, all right, I've got to talk to you. I was like,
I
I'm gonna be
appreciate it.
selfish.
I'm never too busy not to talk about comics.
Good. So, like I said, you've written for TV shows with Winning Time and Boondocks, all this stuff like that. You're working on Killadelphia, Blackula, Monarch, stuff with Marvel coming up. Like, holy buckets, you got a lot coming up, and you got a lot working on. So, I want to know: have you always had a love for comics, or is this something that kind of came about later?
No, I've always loved comics. When I was a kid, my mother used to do her lesson plans at the public library, and I found out where they kept the comics. So I was never really a Curious George, Cat in the Hat kind of kid. I always dug comics, and I kind of credit comics with teaching me storytelling.
Yeah.
They gave me interest in literature early on. They did a lot. They did
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
So, where kind of talk about your journey then? Because, like I said, I know you've written a lot for TV shows, and things like that, but also writing comics. Like, where was this process of, for you where you're like, you know what, I think I want to write and start to create things?
I always wanted, well, my teachers at school told me I had a relationship with words when it came to writing and speaking and those types of things. I never saw that. I come from a small town in Maryland, so I never
Okay.
really saw the bridge from that to one day actually doing it.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I would flirt with the idea. I would go up to the Javits Center when I was a kid and try to meet editors. I was told that was the way that you got writing gigs, but I really wasn't ready to do any of that stuff.
Okay.
Then, as I kind of got older, and certainly after I started writing TV and film, um, I was like, why not take a shot at writing comics too? That was the first love. And I know a lot of times that's a sort of reversed engineered a comics career, because usually guys that write comics first, want to go to TV and film. But I loved them so much, I wanted to do it anyway.
Yeah. So, as someone who writes TV and film, and then as writing comics, is the process for you change at all as a writer with the medium that you're writing, or do you just do you have to fluctuate it a little bit, or is like mostly it stays the same?
The process only changed in the beginning because I realized that I knew nothing about writing comics. And it is vastly different than writing television or just dealing with moving images. I had to
Yep.
learn how, I had to make a relationship with storytelling with art and the flat panel and being able to make it move and to say less, to say more with less.
Yeah.
And I remember my first editor when I worked on Falcon, he read my first script and he said, this is ponderous. That's not the best of words to hear when you're writing. It was like
Right.
so many words. I didn't understand exactly what he was saying until I got the art back. And it was so many words, you almost had to move the words out of the way in order to see the art. So after a while, I learned to sort of figure out my own voice and my own way and my own style of doing it.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Yeah. So let's hop into comics a little bit. You said you've worked in it for a while. One of my first exposures to you was Killadelphia, and it has been a delight these last, what, 3 years now running of writing
Yeah,
it.
man. 31. We're coming up on issue 31 now. So yeah, 3 years.
So, and one of the things that I do, what I've appreciated about you, especially like in the trades, you've told kind of stories of where you were at writing these arcs or why you went the certain route you did, and it kind of leads into like, oh, this makes sense. But I got to talk to you though about the original idea for Killadelphia. Like, what was it where you were like, this is something I've got an idea.
I had an idea. I always wanted to do a vampire book anyway.
Okay.
And I loved Blackula as a kid. And I was like, okay, one day I'm going to tell my version of Blackula. I'm going to do this thing. But there were two stories that were sort of walking next to one another. And one didn't fit the world of Blackula, and the other one was more of a personal father and son story. So I was like, okay, I need a house for that one. And I started working and putting the pieces together, and I figured out the father-son story, which is loosely based on my relationship with my father. He wasn't a vampire, but my father.
Thank you for
And
that clarification.
well, yeah, I just wanted to make sure, just to make that part clear. Um, but until I found, spoiler alert, the John Adams part and the political part, um, I really was sort of flirting with an idea that wasn't a fully formed idea.
Okay.
Then once I had the idea, I was it's like, okay, now what do I do with it? I knew nothing about the business of comics, but I've been working with Jason Sean Alexander on an art book that someone had hired me to interview him on. And we figured out, well, we found out that we only lived a mile apart from each other.
Oh, wow.
So we started going to dinner on a regular basis. I would pitch my ideas to him. He would pitch his ideas to me. We both hated each other's ideas. And one night we went to dinner and he was drinking whiskey and I pitched him Killadelphia. And I think my pitch was Dracula meets Hamilton meets Sanford and Son. And he's like, okay, tell me more. And we kept going and we kept going. And he said, I really like that. I think that's something we could do. And I'm thinking it's the whiskey. I'm thinking,
Right.
yeah, I really like the idea. And the next morning he called and he said, that thing with the vampires and the presidents, did you write that down? I said, no, it's in my head. He said, write it down. I think we could do something.
Yeah.
And got it to Image, and the rest is history.
That's I love that. It's like, you know what? Yeah, I think you got something here. Let's work on that. So you always knew you wanted to tell vampire stories, like you said, and with Blackula, and you're like, you had to find the right vehicle. So as a creator, how do you determine like where to say, you know what, I really want to tell this story, but it's not going to fit here? Like, for you knowing, like being smart enough to realize like, trying to mesh what you wanted to do with some stuff in Killadelphia wouldn't work in a Blackula story, I'm assuming.
Right. Yeah, I think tonally, what Blackula was really more of a genre story that was trying to be Dracula,
Yeah.
but for the African American community. And the story I wanted to tell was more politically based and had a lot of other sociological stuff, and it was emotional in a different kind of way, and it was mostly a male centric story about a really hard city, and the city itself was a character in the book.
Right.
And when you're doing a Blackula story, it's really more about Prince Mamuwalde, aka Blackula. That's the story. So once you start doing a synopsis and putting the pieces together, whether you do it in your head or on paper, you start to say, this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit. And if enough doesn't fit, you've got to stick with the parts that do.
Yeah.
And the story tells you what it wants to be. And Killadelphia wanted to be Killadelphia, and Blackula wanted to be Blackula.
So when you got this, because the first arc is what, 6 issues?
Yeah, each one is 6 issues. Yeah.
So, I know creating comics is a little bit different of, from writing a movie, from the aspect of there's a possibility of continuing the story and telling more. So how did you approach Killadelphia? Like, did you have like, we're talking now, issue 31 is about to come out. Like, did you have that vision, or did that kind of, as you're working on the first arc, you said, you know what, I think there's more to this world if people want it?
I knew what I wanted it to be. I knew I didn't want it to just be a street story of vampires in the hard city.
Yeah.
After each arc, I kind of go back and I look at it and I say, okay, how can we be different? How can we not duplicate the same thing? And at a certain point, you start writing the story, and if there's a feeling of sameness that's there, like I'm sort of dealing with the same people and trying to figure out how to use the same people again and again and again, I'm not really allowing the world to expand. I got to let the world expand. Again, the story tells me what it wants to be or what it doesn't want to be, but I have to put in things that feel organic to that movement. I'm not just doing it because I've run out of ideas.
Yeah.
So I plant seeds early on that I think will grow and create bridges into the fantasy stuff. Because if you read the first 2 arcs of Killadelphia, it mostly takes place in Philadelphia. Then you get into, you're talking to Jesus and you're moving around the dark realm and you're in heaven and you're in hell and you're in different places. And almost feels like a Spawn book a little bit. You know, it's like you're moving around, you're fighting angels and the devil and different things. And, you know, it's all built off of the last thing, but you have to continue to put little seeds in there that can grow and
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah. And, you know, if people are watching this and haven't read Killadelphia, first, shame on you. But I mean, it's out in solicits. It was the end panel of the last page. You're introducing Spawn into the world.
Yeah.
So at what point was it where the conversations started to happen where you're like, you know, it's there because you said it started to feel like a Spawn book at parts of bringing in heaven and hell. You know, where was it? We're like pitching the idea of like, you know what, let's see if this could work into this world.
When we were doing arc number 4, I think it was, um, Jason said, I think it would be cool if we could get Spawn in here. I said, could you, he asked me, could you come up with a story? Could you work him into the world? I said, yeah, I can work him into the world. I had no idea how I was going to work him into the world. But I'm like, if you get Spawn, sure, I'll figure out. If you get Batman, I'll figure out a way to get him in here.
Right.
And that was kind of the beginning. And it didn't happen immediately. But as soon as you plant the seed in a neurotic writer's head, you're going to start doing the math of how could this fit and keep playing it with it and playing with it and playing with it until you figure out a way,
Yeah.
you know, and I think we figured out a way.
Now, was there a lot of like behind the scenes process to kind of get that to work with, you know, I know Spawn is probably Image's baby of saying, hey, we want to bring this into our property, you know, or were they kind of pretty close, like, you know what, this could work really well?
Shout out to the Todd father. You know, Jason, having worked on Spawn before, they had a relationship. So I think it's really initially Todd's trust in Jason and his opinion.
Yeah.
And then we had a conversation and that went well. And the editors on the book as well. You know, they were a part of it as well and sort of gave the boundaries of how the character should be presented or how they would like the character to be presented. And my whole thing was sort of finding balance between not making it a Spawn book, you
Right.
know, or not making like losing Killadelphia along the way.
Yeah.
Because there's things that people like about Killadelphia, but Spawn is here. You got to honor. So there's like this weird balance that you're trying to strike between making him feel like he's not just a guest coming in the booth sales or whatever,
Right.
but really feels organic to the world. And that took a hot second. You know, that took a minute to sit there and just play with and say what are the things in Killadelphia that would fit in a Spawn book and vice versa.
Yeah.
And how do their personalities work, the Killadelphia characters that would be presented in that story and Spawn. And I think it's really, really fun.
Nice. I I love that, you know, getting to see that, bringing an iconic character like that into this world. I think it's going to be just a fun experience to kind of see, because it's like you said, it started to feel like, you know, you're bringing in Jesus, you're bringing in heaven and hell. Like, this is a massive universe now that has spawned out of, no pun intended, out of out of your writing here.
And you've got Anansi, you know, who's a god. And so you've got that god devil connection right
Mhm.
there anyway, which is where Spawn occupies a lot of space and power.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it works really well. I think it works really well. I think Savage Dragon was a little harder fit um, because it's a different kind of character. But again, that plays more into Chicago versus Philadelphia.
Mm. Kind of exploring out more into we've expanded the world, but it's been Philadelphia, or kind of almost like more out around, but now you're expanding even stateside a little bit more, and you're just
Yeah.
really growing.
And being
And
able to have fun with the idea that Philadelphia isn't this place like an island
right.
that exists all by itself. We're still in America, we're still in Pennsylvania, we're still like, you know, there's other stuff going on. I got to remind you of that as well too.
Yeah. You know, and you had a spinoff of this world that you kind of brought back into this arc with Nina Hall. Like, is it for you? How do you determine of like taking something that like is in that world and saying, you know what, this is something I could spend more time of in a kind of offshoot of the world, but not put it in the main book for a while? Like, how do you process that as a creator?
Well, I think when you create a character, it's really what that character's purpose is, are we trying to create a character that's going to support our main characters, or is this character strong enough that they can stand on their own? And with Nita Hawes, I wanted to have a presence that was strong enough that we could establish her and really get to know her and her brother Jason, the ghost, and sort of the rhythm of how that works, which isn't all that much different than Killadelphia, but it's narratively, it challenges you in a different way. It's more of like Kolchak the Night Stalker. There's more of a detective mystery type thing that's happening, more so than in Killadelphia, where it's, vampires and blood and guts. But again, bringing her into that world, she had some tendrils of the original first arc. I think she was mentioned in the first volume because Jimmy had a life before he came to Philadelphia. Right. So, and again, it's sort of fit for her to be there too. And she'll have her story in arc 6 that goes with another one of our guest stars too. So it all sort of works.
It's a beautiful thing. And like you have, we spent a lot of time on Killadelphia. We haven't even touched on Blackula or Monarch. Like for you as a creator, with these comic books that you're putting, where do you get the process for you of saying, you know what, I think this is the medium that I want to tell? Because you're so involved in so many mediums. How do you determine which medium to tell a story in?
A lot of it comes to keeping myself interested in writing. Like, I'm a huge fan of Richard Matheson, the author of I Am Legend and a bunch of other great things, Twilight Zone, Kolchak the Night Stalker, a lot of things. And the great thing about his writing was he did sci-fi, he did horror, he did love stories, he did so many different things. And Stephen King too, I'm a huge fan as well. And mysteries, horror, fantasy, westerns, a little bit of everything. And I wanted to be that kind of storyteller too. I wanted to be able to be narratively nimble and to challenge myself to try to not just be the vampire Killadelphia guy, but to be able to create other worlds that could sustain themselves. Not just to say that I did it, but to do it in a way that feels like you're honoring the genre that you happen to be occupying for that moment.
Yeah. So it seems also like that settings are a big process or a big staple in your writing of, Philadelphia, taking place where it is, obviously, but even like working on Winning Time, you spend a lot of time about the culture of Boston, a lot of culture of LA, in Monarch, the setting is crucial to the story. What is it about you with having the settings be part of like basically a character, like you said earlier?
Well, I think, if you look at America and you break it down into manageable parts, regionally, you look at hip hop. Yeah. If you have West Coast hip hop is different than East Coast hip hop, than Southern hip hop, like every region has its own sound.
Yeah.
And I think every region in comics, as far as the stories that I'm telling or trying to tell, has its own style. Horror has its own style. And so the characters would react differently. A Northern character might react differently than a Southern character would, who was cultured differently, who heard different stories, who had different just different sensibilities. And so I wanted to be able to use America as a map of possibility as far as how to go about telling stories.
Yeah. Which it makes sense because there's so many different, pockets of society where, like you said, your culture is going to dictate your reaction to something. And so if you grew up in this, in the South or in the North, you're going to probably react differently to it. So it makes sense that would fit into your storytelling. Man, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask of one of my favorite things these past couple of summers have been watching Winning Time. And it was an absolute delight. And it's just such a different style of writing in my mindset for then I'm guessing for the process of comics. So is, something like that, how do you get into when you have a source material already that you kind of dig into a little bit? Is it a different process for you than coming up with something where you are collaborating with other people?
Not really. I mean, I've been writing television since 2000.
Yeah.
So I'm used to that process. I'm used to collaboration. I'm used to even, doing it by myself. But regardless of what it is, I know screenwriting probably that's the first.
Yeah.
And so that part is easy. it's easy to get into. It's not necessarily easy to execute, but it's easy to approach,
Yeah.
whereas comics, on the other hand, have a different kind of I I have to have a different sense of the artists I'm working with,
Yeah.
the page count I'm working with, how many issues I'm working with. It's just a different experience all the way around. But I always wanted comics to be like a practice that didn't take as long as writing a movie. It takes me about a month or so to write a movie,
Okay.
and I can write a comic in a few days. And so being able to have that exercise to just keep coming back to um, is sort of good as a
Yeah.
practice, like shooting free throws.
Yeah.
It's like you got to keep hitting them. And for winning time, there weren't many of us that were writing that show, but it was intense. And we had a huge cast that a lot of those, everybody had to be serviced, different
Yep.
worlds as
Hmm.
far as the management, the coaches, and the players. And so each one had to get its, and the Bus family, the family story.
Yeah.
Uh, each one of it had to get some love, but we had some great folks in there, and we were able to put it together. Sorry, it's not still here.
Yeah. I am too. It was one of my favorites. It still is. I just rewatched season 2 this last couple weeks. So
All right.
so good.
Did you see me in the first episode? I'm in the first episode coming
In the
to
first episode was not a season 2 though, right?
of season two. I'm
Oh,
in the
were you?
first
I saw because I
episode
saw
when
you
they
were a
were running
security guard
off the
in
floor.
season 1, weren't you?
I was a lot in season one. I
Yeah.
was in one scene in season two where they're running off the floor when the Celtic fans are
Yeah.
throwing things at them. And I'm at the door saying, these white people have lost their fucking minds.
Well, now I've
So
got to rewatch. I
you got
guess
to
I got to
rewatch
rewatch
it
it.
now. You got to rewatch it now.
Yeah, because I knew I saw you in the first season as security guard at one point. And
Yes,
so
yes. The head of Lakers security. He's a very important person. He's very important to this process. But
that's right. That's right. So I one last thing before I kind of want to open it up for you to just kind of talk about stuff that you're working on. I kind of hinted that you're just such a busy person, and with writing comics and writing scripts, and you have a new podcast coming out I just saw recently. You're still working on movie. Like, how do you doing interviews, doing comic, you're coming to my town here in a couple months for Comic-Con, like, so like how do you
yeah,
balance just doing life and doing creating and still managing things?
my therapist should probably connect you with my therapist to answer that question. I do the best I can.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is not a seamless process, and I would love to be able to say, oh man, I got it all under control.
Right.
I don't. Some things fall through the cracks, but you only get so many summers
Right.
in life, and you only have but so much time to do the things that we want to do. And I have a lot of things that I want to do. So it's best to kind of exhaust them now while I can. And when people seem to be interested in giving me opportunities, I want to get it out of my system and take a shot and see what can happen. But it is a madness.
Yeah.
Every morning I wake up to probably 30, 40 emails, angry emails. And I respond to the ones where I'm getting cussed out the worst. So whether it's an editor saying, where's my book? Or it's a producer saying, where's my script? Or whatever it is, every day is sort of an unknown,
Yeah.
as to what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. Well, I always want to respect your time as a creator, but I kind of want to open up, like, there's a lot we haven't talked about. But is there stuff that you are in the process of working on in any medium that you're like, I would love to just kind of hit on this a little bit and talk about what I got coming up?
Well, coming up, I've got a mini series at HBO about Jack Johnson, first black heavyweight champion of the world, with Mahershala Ali, the great Mahershala Ali.
Nice.
I'm working on that. I think the other day it was announced that I'm doing The Longest Yard, another Longest Yard. I've got another feature that hasn't been announced yet, but that should be coming out in a couple of days. More of a sci-fi horror thing. Couple more in development, couple TV shows in development. Run Fool, the podcast, drops November the 14th, next week. I've got another podcast I'm going to be starting soon. That's a true crime, sports true crime thing that I'm doing. and a whole lot of comic books. I've got a couple of Star Wars books I'm starting. I've got a major character from the DC universe who I can't say who it is that I'm going to be working on. Luke Cage comes in
Yeah.
December. Already doing The Mandalorian. I think season 2 is closing out now. I think I said I have a Star Wars book.
Yep.
Killadelphia, the new run, Arc 6. So a bunch of stuff, man. Bunch of
Yeah.
stuff.
It's crazy. You got me excited when you mentioned DC that you can't talk about, but
Yeah, I
we'll
got a
get there.
couple of DC projects coming. Yeah, a couple of characters you would not immediately identify me with, but I couldn't
Okay.
be more honored to be a part of.
Nice. I'm excited for that. And you had I don't know if we mentioned you had a book. You wrote a book with Exhibit, right?
I
That's
did Florence
not
and Normandy. That, Lord willing, will come out in the spring.
okay.
So
Okay,
yeah,
so it's some time out for that then still too. I remember
yeah,
seeing
we
posts at
did
New
some
York.
ash cans. We did some ash cans and did a
Oh, okay.
signing at New York Comic Con
Okay.
to just kind of show folks what it is and let them know it's still coming.
Yep. And the Luke Cage, is that you said that's a mini series or
That's
is it
4 issues.
okay.
It is the start of gang war.
Okay, so it's tied into
New,
that world.
yeah, it's tied into gang war because he's mayor of New York.
Right.
So, the mayor's got to do something.
Right. Do you, if you don't mind, is there a real quick when you're kind of working in something like an event like that, is
Yeah.
there a lot more collaboration than usual when you're writing a comic talking about what other writers are doing and how is that kind of
In the beginning, there is, usually there is a sort of a breakdown of what everybody's world is
okay.
happening at the same time, what's happening in their world. And then as you're executing scripts, a lot of times the editors will guide you and say, you can do this or you can't do that because this is happening in that book. And this is, so blah, you have to cross streams. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's a lot of that up front. As the series goes and it becomes more about the book that you're writing, you kind of flow into your own world that you're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Rodney, like I said, I could talk to you forever because you got so many different things working on that I've just fallen in love with, you as a creator
Thank
across
you.
all markets of things.
I appreciate
But where can people follow along with you to stay up to date with what you're making?
At the Rodney Barnes on Twitter and Instagram is probably where I'm the most. Well, it's not Twitter anymore, it's X. But I would call it Twitter. I'll call it Twitter till the end of my days.
Same.
But Twitter, hey,
I
I
think
don't
we
know
all
how
are.
to. Yeah, X is like, all right, I don't know what I'm saying. Is it 10? Is it X? Um, yeah, Instagram and Twitter is at the Rodney Barnes, and that's where I'm mostly active and where I chit chat the most. Facebook is for all my high school folks.
Nice.
So,
So,
yeah.
well, Rodney, again, it's been a delight. Looking forward to connecting here and at GalaxyCon a little bit, maybe get Blackula signed.
Oh yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
But with that being said, gang, go out, support Killadelphia. As you know, the new arc's coming out here real soon once this video drops. All the other comics that Rodney talked about, the projects he's working on and film and TV, go support it, go check it out, follow along with what Rodney's working on. And with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out.
It would be nice. It would be nice.
Peace.